Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hump Day edition of The Rundown, the first Hump Day of 2022. I will be your host today, Craig DeLuz, coming at you from the West Coast, the left coast, behind the Iron Curtain, otherwise known as the Sierras. But as you know, I do not do this program by myself.
No, I tend to help out when I have some time available. And today I do because I love everybody at the Rundown here where we give you 2A news and conservative views. My name is Mike Poworski. I'm coming to you live from the East Coast, the coast with the most, the co-host with the most. Let's have a great day, Craig. Let's do it. Let's get this thing going.
You know why it's going to be a great day, right?
Because it's Hump Day.
Hump Day!
Uh-oh. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Mike. What day is it, Mike?
It's Hump Day.
Hump Day!
Oh, yeah. Gotta love it. Got to love
Yep.
Hump Day. It is it is our first attempt at beginning the weekend.
That's right. We make every effort to go from here. Yep. This is where Hump Day starts for me. Try and start it right now. Well, listen, I know try and start about noon today is where I tried to start, but I'm still working, so we'll see how it goes.
It'd be like that sometimes, but you know what? In this particular case, it's all about the effort.
That's right. It might not be Hump Day on the calendar, or it might not be the weekend on the calendar, but it is in my heart.
It is in my heart. I heart Hump Day.
Hump Day. Yep, that's it.
So how's the weather there, my friend?
We again, it's pretty chilly here. We've got 60s and 50s going on. So
You did not just say it's chilly at 50s and 60s.
I'm wearing long sleeves. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah.
No. Let's be clear. I will know that it is truly cold when Mike Piwowarski wears pants. Long pants, that is.
Listen, the only way that's happening is weddings or funerals or court. Those are the only times. And weddings,
Well,
it's
and if you have to wear a
50-50.
uniform.
Yeah, weddings is 50-50 if I'm going to wear if I'm wearing pants, but weddings and court
Pants
and,
of any kind or just shorts versus pants?
well, just pants versus shorts. Yeah. Now there's plenty of weddings that ended up without pants or shorts, but that was completely different reasons. It was like a pool party. What are you thinking, you pervert? So no, good stuff. Yeah, I just once the real retirement started to take place, like okay, definitely not wearing pants, and definitely not wearing polyester pants ever again if I don't have to. So it's just kind of
Well, and that's like I said, those of you who know, one of the advantages of living in Florida and being your own boss to a certain degree and having the ability to control your own schedule and all of that is the ability to control one's attire.
That's right.
When I worked in the legislature, I had suits galore. I don't get me wrong, I still enjoy wearing suits, but I'm not gonna, now that I work for myself and I largely work from home, I'm not going to walk around the house in a suit and tie all day when I don't have to.
Craig, I have, and I don't want to get into it, too in depth. I don't want to take up too much time, but I have a closet full of suits, full of uniforms, full of tuxedos, full of custom made stuff, full of off the rack stuff. I've got an incredible dress up wardrobe, and I just don't have to wear it anymore.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was about a year and a half ago, was going past a formal store, one of those like rent a tux kind of places.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a going out of business sale. And I figured, all right, I'm still like nice clothes. Let me stop in there real quick. Craig, I bought, I think it was 5 tuxedos and 5 suits for like $80.
Wow.
And listen, they were so cheap. I mean, it's just like $10 a tuxedo.
Right.
I've contemplated cutting the grass in them. Just because it would be cheaper to ruin that tux than it would be just a nice T-shirt I like.
Well, I will tell you, and I had this conversation with my adult son. I told him, I said, look, if you are a professional, every professional young or old man needs to own at least one tuxedo. Just own it. Get a basic. Don't get like whatever the modern style is. Just get the basic. the basic black tuxedo, and you can always buy different. I mean, it's just something you should have because I'm like, if you're a professional, you're going to be attending the sort of events where you're going to want to wear a tuxedo.
People know the difference between a rented tuxedo and a tuxedo that you own that's fitted for you and how comfortable you look, even in that base model tuxedo. And like you said, only thing you might need to do is change the color of the tie, the vest, or the cummerbund. And other than that, you're good to go.
Boom, boom, pow. But yeah, everyone should own that. That's my piece of adulting advice for the day.
There you go. Yeah, and at least one good suit, dark blue or black suit.
Yes. Most definitely, most definitely. Well, hey, let's go ahead and get into today's news, shall we? Let's see it.
We shall.
That. Go over here. Clear that one. All right, so our first story today, well, we all know that there's this big rumor out there, right? And the rumor is that that the CDC doesn't have the ability to research firearms, use of firearms, or violence involving firearms. So first of all, we already know that that is a myth. And one of the reasons why we know it's a myth is because we know that those sorts of studies actually go on and actually do take place. And one great example was written by over at Bearing Arms by our good friend Tom Knighton, where he points out inconvenient studies get buried by the media. And the reason why, and these studies in particular that they're talking about here are the studies relating to firearms. Because in the end, once they do these studies, they find that, the studies actually show that gun control does not work. And that's what he's pointing out in this particular article here that's currently up over at Bearing Arms. Now, Mike, it's not just the studies that prove this. Wow, and I feel really bad because I've actually spelled studies wrong. I literally just noticed that I spelled studies wrong.
It's Wednesday. You got a case of the Studies.
Studies. Oh, man. See, that's what happens when you get up early in the morning and you start putting these things together. Probably should go back later and do some checking, but I will allow all of you. I'm going to assume that all of you will forgive me for my mistake.
That's all right. We've started our weekend. You can't be that studious, right?
So, Mike, tell me a little bit. What do you think? First of all, what do you think about these quote unquote gun violence studies?
Listen, we see them happen all the time, right? Every time that there's a story that comes out about how a gun control effort has worked, how a pro-gun, rescinding of a law has worked. It's the only thing that the media will print is the lie, is the portion of the article that looks good for them. They will not focus on the actual truth, what's going on. And Craig, in many cases, they'll do these studies and find exactly right, like you said, that the results were not what they expected, that they were purely pro-gun in nature at the end of the study. So what they'll do is go back and change the criteria. You'll get something along the lines of, rather than gun ownership is on the rise and preventing crime, Massachusetts, they're going to give you the stats from 16 to 19-year-olds where it's increased in crime. Well, guess what? 16 to 19-year-olds are still it's still illegal for them to own the firearm, no matter whose laws you're looking at. So they will change the criteria on you to tilt it in one direction or the other. So these studies are, again, handpicked and manipulated in such a way that they can't be truth. You and I both know one of the greatest, crime research analysts out there with Dr. John Lott, and his stories are refused. The people refuse to put them in there. See, people on the left refuse to look at his stories because it's nothing but facts and numbers. And Dr. Lott's an economist. He's not a pro-gun guy. He simply looks and analyzes criteria, data, and numbers and puts it together. And when you look at those, it's clear how gun control does not work, and removing restrictive gun laws does provide for society.
Well, Mike, it's also funny because when you look at it, first of all, the couple of things happen here. Number one is either the study itself is flawed and how they go about doing and conducting the research. That's one big problem in many cases with a lot of these studies. And you can see, and that's where really that John Lott really stands out in terms of pointing out how either the collection of their data or the omission of certain data that they use, and when you include that data, or when you correct for their mistake, how the outcome, how the data actually winds up looking significantly different. But then there's also the misinterpretation of the data. And a great example is UC Davis just did a study, and they were talking about the impacts of gun violence. And they're talking about, they were specifically looking at California. And Garen Wintemute, who I've met personally, who is a former emergency room physician, by the way, who does not study people, studies medicines, disease, and injuries, and believes that the Second Amendment is a disease, or at least acts like he believes that it's a disease. But he's talking about, well, this is a need for more laws relating to gun violence, right? I forgot to do my air quotes, gun violence. But what he fails to note is that we've passed a number of laws in the state of California. We are arguably the state with the strictest gun laws in the entire country, and yet you've seen dramatic increases in firearms-related injuries, firearms-related deaths in the state of California, which tells you that gun control is not working. But that's not their thing is we need more gun control. Not gun control is not working. And that's one of the fundamental problems is this misrepresentation of what the data actually tells us.
Again, right? We need one more law. We need one more law. If you give me one more law, we'll be able to get control of everything that's going on. No matter what happens, anytime there's a crime, anytime there's anything involving a firearm, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, we need more law to control it. Because, laws like murder and attempted murder and shooting people, those laws are not enough. So we need more laws, more lies.
Well,
just so it's out there. I want to make sure people can find it. It's the Crime Research Center. It's crimeresearch.org. crimeresearch.org. It's the Crime Prevention Research Center. But just go to crimeresearch.org when you're ever looking for stats or needs, and that's Dr. John Lott's organization.
Dr. John Lott. Definitely make sure you want to hit them up. And Mike, this leads me into leads us into I think our next story, which has to do with and going back to what I said about Garen Wintemute and his saying, well, maybe we need more gun control, but the evidence shows, and this ain't even a study; these are just the numbers. For example, in Los Angeles, homicides have hit a 15-year high. 15-year high. Now, let's see. The last time this were the case, 15 years ago was when we had in place things like 3 strikes, when we had mandatory minimums. This was well before most of the gun control that takes place that exists now in California wasn't even in place yet. And still, we see a 15-year high there in Los Angeles. But then you can also go right over here to Chicago. Chicago is hit in 2021. It's the deadliest year in a quarter of a century for, wait for it, Lori Lightfoot's Chicago. Oh, we already said it once, and we're only going to say it once, right, Mike?
Don't say it again. I like the picture with her and Corn Pop, though.
I actually think this reveals that she is Corn Pop.
Oh, okay.
Because Biden looks slightly intimidated. Look, and the dude in the background is like, jump, I dare you.
Yeah.
But think about that. In city after city, I think this year was something like 12. In 12 major cities, they broke records for increases in violence involving firearms. And these are also all places where there's a significant amount of gun control, where there are significant limits on an individual's ability to keep and bear arms. Now, that in and of itself ought to tell you that gun control isn't working.
Listen, we again, just similar to the last story, right? We know that gun control doesn't work. We know that the violence continues to rise in the cities with the highest amount of gun control. We tell you what has happened in has happened, and they refuse to report this statistic out of Chicago as well. We know that the crime there, like we said, we went up. It was 794 shot and killed this year. 794 shot and killed this year. Up until 2 or 3 years ago, Craig, we had the everyday citizen being involved in these shootings. I'm not talking about the drive-bys. I'm talking about people that were targeted as victims in the city of Chicago. And we saw a slight downward trend after that happened. Well, the bad guys went out and reassessed themselves, and they realized, okay, guess what? We can't pick on innocent people anymore, or regular everyday citizens, because now it's legal for them to own a firearm and to carry it to protect themselves. So they shifted their tactics to criminal on criminal crime. And when I tell you there's 794 people shot and killed, except for the people that might have been caught in a crossfire, the targets of every one of those was criminal on criminal. So, it's you can't just allow, all right, I'm going to let the good people carry the guns. You still have to go after the bad people. You can't decriminalize crime. All right. You can't authorize the law-abiding people to carry guns without making criminal statutes for criminals to carry firearms. All right. It's not going to work, because guess what? The law-abiding are not going to go policing the criminals. That's for the police to do. And if the state takes away those violations, like we've continued to see, then the numbers are not going to come to swing all the way around.
Well, the other thing is, and getting back to the broken windows theory,
yep.
There are some people who are going to push the line, and that is just in their nature. I mean, it's really kind of in all of our nature. But some people are they're going to push the line, and we have to understand that if we don't enforce rules at a lower level, once again, like broken windows, things like vagrancy, things like
nuisance crimes,
petty crimes, and shoplifting and stuff like that. If we don't enforce those laws, then the individuals who are committing those laws are eventually going to do a little bit more. And a little bit more. And they're going to commit a little bit more serious crimes until eventually they're committing crimes that involve violence against other individuals. And oftentimes that violence is going to involve firearms. Simply removing firearms, or the ability of people, of law-abiding citizens, to be able to have a firearm, that's not going to change. That's not going to change the criminal's ability or willingness to enact violence. And once again, if they're not caring about the law, then they're not going to care that they're not supposed to have a gun or use a gun on individuals. So all you're doing is disarming potential victims, and you're opening the door for criminals. You're telling criminals, look, it's probably, if this guy's a law-abiding citizen, it's safer for me to rob him now than it was when, individuals could actually arm themselves and carry a firearm.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's what we're seeing. That's the trend. We cannot. It's two halves to a solution, right? Everybody's like, well, we have to do something. Well, guess what? Letting the innocent people arm themselves is one half. You still have to continue to enforce criminal statutes against those that are using the firearms illegally. Just because we say we want to allow the average citizen to get their firearm does not mean we're going to let a felon open carry a machine gun. No, you must still enforce those, because when you don't, you end up with 794 shot and killed in the city of Chicago.
Exactly. By the way, Mike, just before I move on to our next story, I wanted to note the magic of of technology and the film. I want you to notice I got it right.
Studies. Oh, we got it. Yeah, we're back to there. We go. Studies.
We're no longer studies. We're now.
I was going to be stuck on saying studies there for quite a long time now. Yeah.
Oh, you gotta love technology. Moving right along. Okay, our next story has to do with, well, how do I want to put this? So, it is amazing to me, just how people are not willing to take the time to actually listen to what people have to say. Because I'm watching this story in particular, and I'm watching now, these are two individuals who support an agenda the agenda of the people that are criticizing them. While at the same time they want to cancel them because of the appearance of what they think it is. And what am I talking about? First of all, I'm talking about Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle, a comedian who did The Closer, who had, as a part of the routine, had jokes involving the trans community. And what's funny is that as a part of this joke, he's specifically talking about how he supports the trans community, he supports trans rights, he's talking about all this stuff. But he's really, what he's going after is the members, the aggressive members of the trans community who went after a friend of his who was trans because they didn't think they were trans rights enough. And this individual's friend of Dave Chappelle's wound up committing suicide. Now, regardless, repeatedly he said in the special, supports trans rights, yada, yada, yada. Didn't matter because they went after him. Well, another comedian posted a picture of himself on Instagram, an individual named Patton Oswalt, where talking about how he celebrated New Year's Eve with Dave Chappelle. And needless to say, the Twitter sphere went all a Twitter and decided that they were going to go after him and talk about him and beat him up. And to the point where Oswalt felt it was necessary for him to post an apology. A long apology of, for posting the picture, but it also an explanation, once again, that he supports them, supports those rights, why he supports their rights, yada, 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 and all of that stuff. And yet still, because people aren't willing to actually, watch the special from Dave Chappelle and actually listen for themselves what he had to say, they're also not willing to read the essay that dude wrote himself or the original post itself. They just want to be angry. That's why I titled the segment "The Intolerance of the Tolerant."
Yeah, no, it's good titling. It's not as good as studies, but it's good titling. This is kind of just so hypocritical. It's crowd pleasing. Whatever the right term is for it. We both know well, and folks, well what Dave Chappelle's been doing. You've gotten the updates from us here, and I'm sure you're fans of his as well. He's the one out there breaking down the woke people. All right, every time they tell us what can't be done, Dave takes it back up to them and puts it in their face and makes them look respectable, or makes his comments look respectable and makes them look ridiculous. He's doing great things for the First Amendment right now, and to think that it would have come out of stand-up comedy, I never would have guessed that a few years back. This thing with Patton Oswalt, and Patton Oswalt's a pretty good comedian. I don't know if you ever listened to him before or watched any of the work he's done. He's pretty good, but he totally 100% caved, just bent over and took it during this. Him and Dave Chappelle started together as young comedians in the same clubs. They were good friends. Dave asked them to come over when they were in two parts of I guess it was in California, down there in Los Angeles, two clubs recently, and Dave invited him to come over and do some work with them on stage. They hadn't done that in a while, and that, like you said, that first picture from Patton was him celebrating his friendship. And when he got attacked because, Dave Chappelle is the devil, that you're right, he wrote a 5,000-page essay about how Dave's his friend, but they don't agree on 100%, and he's adamantly against what Patton. It's clear Patton Oswalt hadn't even watched Dave's show, had not seen what Dave said about the LGBT community. That Dave is not the homophobe that everybody's making him out to be. So listen, it's just another guy who fell cowardly to the pressures of the Twitter sphere, and as my cousin Vinny said, I'm done with this guy. So he's out. Patton, who? I don't know who he is anymore.
Well, ultimately, here's the thing: the great thing about comedy is really about taking truth, taking reality, and kind of expanding it, or at least a perspective, expanding it and mocking it and making fun of it, and really getting people to look at it in a fun, lighthearted way.
Well, and what's the formula? Remember, is tragedy plus time equals comedy. It's just a matter of determining the right time.
Exactly. And in this particular case, what's frustrating to me is that it takes courage to do comedy, because you have to, if it's really good comedy, you're going to push the envelope. And the worst part here is you have an individual who, somewhere along the lines, he went from being a young, hungry comedian interested in speaking the truth, and decided that the money was more important to him, and the fear of losing his audience. I mean, this is what gets me here is you have Dave Chappelle, who has no fear of losing his audience, right?
Right.
He's not worried about losing his audience. If he was worried, he never would have quit the Chappelle show, right? If that were a big deal to him. As a result of that, he's bigger now than ever, right?
Yep.
But at the other hand, you have a guy who really, it started off with nothing, has a little something, and now is basically kowtowering and cowering because he doesn't want to lose the little bit that he has. Yep. And here's the thing, folks, he's going to lose that too, because anybody who had any respect for him, one, if they had respect for him, but they don't like the whole him being associated with Chappelle, they're done with him. Right? They don't care about his apology. And people who appreciated the fact that he was willing to stand up and be a comedian and talk about and stand up with Dave Chappelle, people who like that, well, now that he's kowtowed, they will have nothing to do with him. So now he will go into obscurity. Back to obscurity,
and he's probably, like you said, he's ruined his career also, because remember, he's not just a comedian; he does a fair bit of television. And even in some movies, he's good friends with that East Coast crowd, that East Coast conservative comedians, the Kevin James, the Adam Sandlers. We've talked about them before. You think now that he's done this, that he stood up and dissed, Dave Chappelle, that the likes of Kevin James and an Adam Sandler are going to have anything to do with Patton Oswalt anymore? Not publicly, not professionally. No, so done.
Yep. That there be the way it be.
Yep.
All right, let's move right along. We're getting short on time here, and we got a few stories left to cover. The next story that we are going to be covering has to do with Orange. Actually, Mike, I'm thinking this might be better for you to comment on, seeing as how this is in your neck of the woods. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pass the baton on to you to talk about this next story.
We'll do this, and I know we're running short on time, so we'll try and give you the wrap here on this one. Yesterday, Tuesday, was the first day back to school in Orlando, Florida. Orlando is in the top 5 of sizes of school districts in the nation. So just to give you that the size element, most people may not think of Orlando as that big, but it's one of the top 5 school districts in the country. So our mayor here is adamantly, pro-liberal and pro-COVID and everything else, and fights with Captain Florida, Governor DeSantis, every day, and makes himself look foolish. Well, there was a big story, and that's why we'll drop this link just into your into the comments here for you to see later on that there's 5,000 teachers. I think 700. It was, just around 12% of the teachers called in sick. And it was about that many of the students that also called in sick, because the news media has got everybody believing that Omicron is the death of us. Well, this entire story goes down through and talks about Omicron, the positive rate. Omicron, there's so many people with Omicron. There's so many people with Omicron that, we're going back to masks. We're going back to everything else. And that's what's the crux of the story, is that they're all lies. It's all misleading. Again, no numbers beyond the positive number of Omicron. The mayor got up on the TV yesterday and said we're at a 30% positive rate of the 1 million people in Central Florida, in Orlando, that we're at a 30% positive rate. Craig, I have been tested, and I don't know anybody else that's been tested, so I don't know where the hell they're coming up with these numbers. But this story just continues to tell the lie that, you got Omicron, it's time to shut the world down. We got to flatten the curve. We got to wear masks. We got to do all of this stuff. The mayor here is talking about getting his COVID task force team back out there and enforcing standards, and everybody around town is like, yeah, bring that stuff to me, man. Like Pedro said in Major League, bring that stuff to me, man. Bring that stuff to me.
Mike, what's stupid about this is that now even There are even segments of the mainstream media that are finally reporting that, first of all, Omicron is not that serious. It's
Yeah.
it's in particular, and they always make it a point to point out, it is more particular that it's not that serious if you have been vaccinated. So, I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
the numbers are the same. It's still, if you want to say they're exactly the same, but even if you're unvaccinated, it's still not that as nearly as serious as either Delta or Alpha. So we know already that it's that low. But if you look at it, and I remember in the very beginning, I was going on and I was checking the international and national websites on a daily basis. Now I check them probably once a week. And you see, there's a huge spike. I mean, we just saw a day where there was 1 million people tested positive for Omicron. But guess what you haven't seen a change in? You haven't seen a change in hospital rates since July,
Yep.
August,
Yeah.
since we saw the
Yep.
Delta spike. There really hasn't been much of a change in hospitalizations, and there hasn't been much of a change in terms of deaths and mortality.
Nope.
Because what's happening is people are surviving Omicron. They're
They
surviving
got the
it.
old,
They're
get
surviving
the old
Omicron.
and you know what? This is ridiculous too. Remember, we talked about this was a stat that we saw that actually came from a reputable source. Was that that something like over 50% now that have tested positive are asymptomatic completely. Nothing,
Right.
no idea whatsoever. And those that are symptomatic are maybe one or two. They're talking, and we saw the parting shot on it. Remember, they
Right.
had the scratchy throat and the sniffles.
Right.
That's what they got from this. Not saying there's not serious cases of it. All right. I'm
Mhm.
sure if you get somebody that's got a bunch of contributing factors, this is just as dangerous as the flu would be to one of those people. But this is done and this is over with, and they refuse to let it die.
Well, and because and this is I blame the left and I blame the mainstream media because they're the ones that have been peddling fear and even leading up to Omicron. They were like, oh my God, it's Omicron. Kind of like, like you used to see the old Godzilla movies. They were like, Godzilla, right?
Yeah,
You
Godzilla.
remember that?
Yeah.
That's
Godzilla,
what it's like. It's
Godzilla.
like they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh my
yeah.
God, it's Omicron. Now, by every indication, Omicron was not going to be that bad. By every single indication.
You know the difference between COVID, Omicron, and Godzilla, right?
What?
Godzilla was real.
Godzilla was real. But here's the thing. So now you have people who are out there who are so scared they're running out and they're getting tests. And that leads us to our next story.
Yeah.
Folks, this is in the Atlantic. Stop wasting COVID tests. Please stop. This is the Atlantic. This is the left-wing Atlantic. And even they're saying, folks, stop it. Stop going out and getting tested if you are asymptomatic. If you don't have any symptoms, you don't need to get to. Now, I get it. If you need to go to some places, it's required, right? Some place you got to get tested in order to go if you want to fly internationally, if you want to go certain places, if you're unvaccinated and you want to go certain places, you got to get tested. But stop getting tested just because you're afraid you might have. If you're not symptomatic, don't go get tested. It's a waste of tests, especially at a time when we have a shortage, a national shortage of tests. That, by the way, aren't always accurate.
Yeah, if you notice in that picture, by the way, they're all standing there next to each other, some with masks, some without masks, no social distancing going on as they're waiting in line to get their tests done. I get it, Craig. Listen, if you've got to fly international, if there's a couple places you have to have a test to do that, then that's what you have to do. What have I done? I've stopped flying international. All right. I'll wait till this is over before I go somewhere and have to deal with crazy rules going on there as well. If you get one of those, listen, if you're in one of those states where, if you want to come watch a sporting game or a music event, that you've got to get a COVID test before you go, and tell them to kiss your ass, okay? Because guess what? You vote with your wallet, all right? As long as you continue to kowtow and wear a mask and get a test, they're going to continue to demand that control over you.
Well, what's funny? Me and my brother got into an argument because he was pointing out how Omicron is still going to cause disruptions, right? And it's funny because in the article that he shared, even though they admit that it's not as serious and the hospitalizations aren't up and the deaths aren't up, that it's causing, like, for example, worker shortages, people not being able to show up to work, it's affecting travel and all of that.
Excuses.
And what I explained to my brother
Excuses.
was, here's the thing, and it's the exact same thing that's happened with COVID all along. Overall, COVID has not caused a major disruption. what's caused the major disruption or the long-term major disruption has been government's reaction to it. In states like Florida, where they closed temporarily and then they opened back up, or they never closed at all, or where they actually started taking a look at, okay, let's protect the vulnerable and let's identify what the high risk activities are, and then let's let everyone else kind of live their lives. The economic impact of COVID has been relatively minimal, right? The travel, the daily lives, the educational impact of COVID has been relatively minimal. The thing that has derailed so many states and so many schools and all of that has been the government's reaction to COVID. That's where the problem's been. But anyway, look, hey, we're at 35 minutes, so we're gonna go ahead and go right into our parting shot. Now, you guys all have probably heard about Ghislaine Maxwell. She was the friend of Jeffrey Epstein, who, by the way, in case you didn't know, did not commit suicide. She is the person who helped arrange and groom, or who was convicted of arranging and grooming young girls for sex with Mr. Epstein and his friends. It has been rumored, and I'm sure that she will probably be putting together a list of people who have frequented what they call that island of his, Jeffrey Epstein's island?
Epstein Island.
What?
Epstein Island. Epstein Island.
Epstein Island. Well, let's just put it this way.
Underage
We all know
island.
that he is good friends with a number of politicians, Democrat politicians specifically. They tried to tie him to Donald Trump, but the only image you can find out there with him and Donald Trump is they're not even looking at each other. They're standing near each other looking at two different people.
Right.
But anyway, but there is a politician that they are very, very close with, a politician that has presidential aspirations. So that leads us to our parting shot of the day. Yeah. Maxwell's suicide note. I sent out, I think it was New Year's Eve. I sent out a meme that basically said the meme of the year will be Ghislaine Maxwell did not commit suicide.
Right. Yes, and I think I responded to you with one that said Ghislaine Maxwell, 1961 to a week or so from now.
A week or so from now. Right. All right, Mike. Hey, go ahead. Give us a shout out to our sponsors.
Hey, let's say hi to our good friends at Gorilla Machining at Ghost Defense. Excuse me, Gorilla Machining, Grid Defense. They're formerly known as Ghost. I've known them that long. Grid Defense, and our good friends at the California Republican Assembly.
Excellent, folks. Hey, please make it a point. Like, share, subscribe. You can listen to the audio version of this program anywhere you get podcasts. Check us out. Look for The Rundown, 2A News and Conservative Views. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, and encourage your friends to do the same. One more thing.
Don't forget, SHOT Show Party, Monday, January 17th, Hofbrau House in Vegas.
Yes.
SHOT Show, January 17th in Hofbrau House in Vegas. Come out and see all of us from The Rundown, from Arms Room Radio, from all of our good friends, from Gorilla. The guys from Gorilla will be there. The guys from Grid Defense will be there. It's going to be a heck of a time.
It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. If you can be in Vegas, you want to make sure that you're there. All right, folks, you guys take care. We will see you tomorrow on Thirsty Thursday.